evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It is Monday, April 11th, 2022 at 7 p.m. We are amidst committee meetings tonight, and you might notice that some of us have masks, some of us that don't. And at the top of our agenda that was published, we do say that masks are optional. We are encouraging those who would feel safer to continue to wear a mask when you come into chambers. So thank you. We'll start off tonight with Transportation Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Reisner and joined by Councilmembers Ziff and Swank. Oh, and we do, while you were getting seated, we do have two items to modify on our Finance Committee agenda. We're going to be adding fire headquarters repairs and also fire department staffing. So those will be two additional items under Finance.
We all settled in? Okay. Excuse me. I got a touch of bronchitis. We have three items here under the Transportation Committee. Special event, 72-hour parking permit fee, and 2022 annual paving. So the special event is a request for a street closure to take place on August the 12th, 2022 from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. The street closure is being requested for the event, the Athena Ride for Women. This is a women's only motorcycle event that has been sanctioned by the American Motorcycle Association. It's a charity that they are partnering with. This event is My Sister's Place of Athens, Ohio. Proceeds from the event will be donated to the MSP. My Sister's Place. The reason we're bringing this up is, if you recall, back in January, February, Council passed a list of street closures. The idea was to streamline the process instead of passing separate ordinances all through the year for various street closures that have occurred here in the city. Get it all done at once, and once it's done, we'll forget about it. However, when Andrew Cca, the Deputy Service Safety Director, introduced the concept, he added the caveat that there could be events that are on the list that may be canceled, or there may be an event that has not been considered and may be considered later to be added to the event if it was possible. You know, there was an if statement there. So this, in this case, is the one to have an additional event which will require an ordinance from the city council to close the street, giving the police authorization to set everything up. So I think I've read all the facts of the case for this. If there's any comment or suggestions or otherwise. Member Ziff.
Thank you, Councilor Reisner. I was just curious. I was looking over on the document that we have on our Google Drive with the description of the event. It doesn't say a specific street. Do we know what street it would be, or did I just miss that somehow? Oh, it is Union? Oh, okay. I think I must have missed that. I'm sorry. Gotcha. All right. Cool. So yeah, I think there's been motorcycle events there before in the past. But
Yeah, I think you're right. The administration have anything to add to this?
Just as a reminder that the Athens Arts and Music Festival will also be taking place on Union. It'll be on West Union in between Court and Congress, and that's on the 13th. So there may be some logistics in terms of having the full stretch of Union in between University Terrace and Congress, if that's the intent, to close down that much of East Union Street. But there will be another event that's already been planned for. It'll be going on in that same area.
Lay out the length of Union Street again, please. From where to where?
Court to College.
Court to College. Is that in the Dora?
It is in the Dora. Councilmember Swank, I believe, for sure the West Union is. But not all of East Union is within the DORA footprint, so yes and no.
So I bring that up for two reasons. The second part, the no part, and I guess the primary part was this will be primarily a group of I won't say primarily, there will probably be quite a few individuals from out of town who may not be familiar with DORA, how that works, rules and regulations. So perhaps we need to do two things, figure out what we're going to do with that Union area, or not Union, that part in front of the old Baker Center, since it's outside the DORA, but also conveying to this group in advance so they can convey to their members how DORA works and all of that. I'm not anticipating any problems by any means, but it would be nice to share that information. But I think we do need to think about what happens in that other area. If someone inadvertently is walking down Union Street, crosses court, now they're into the no DORA zone.
Then you hear that funny background music and you realize.
Yeah.
Then the voiceover from Rod Serling.
Yeah.
Okay. You have entered the DORA zone. Little did he realize.
Yeah, something to think about.
Members of council, see, Member Crowell, I had your hand up first.
Thank you, Member Reisner. Two things. One, I believe the intersection of Union and College will be completely closed for a university project working on the steam tunnels. Correct. So that's something to keep in mind, both for the, I don't know how far down Union to the east they will be, but I don't know how many motorcycles are going to try to fit into that area, which is the way we did it in the past, I think. So I don't know where their border is.
Why does it fit them? Ultimately, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's some space that'll still be available on the East Union section in between College and Court. It just won't be the whole stretch.
Right. Okay, and my other, just wanted to say that their selection of a local organization for a fundraiser couldn't be more vital than My Sister's Place, and I'm fully in support of that. Thank you.
Member McCary?
Thanks. I just wanted to confirm that it sounds like this is a one-time request as opposed to getting on the list of our annual closures for events that we anticipate happening on an annual basis.
Well, there's nothing here in Mr. Chickie's memo that would suggest otherwise.
Okay.
But on the other hand, there's nothing there that doesn't not say that it could happen again. A double negative. Mr. Mayor.
To my knowledge, this will be the second or maybe third large motorcycle event like this here in Athens. So I think moving forward, we'll make sure that we communicate that to the executive director for the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Boone Troyer, just to make sure to see if he's anticipating more events like this during the summer, and then making him aware that we have a slate of city street closures for summer events or year-round events, really. So he's aware. But some of these just kind of pop up as well. So this is where I think being a little more flexible with unknowns, events coming into the city that clearly is not aware that we try to pass all these street closings and ordinance, that particular ordinance in one slate. So I'll speak with Director Troyer about that moving forward.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? All righty, next item, 72-hour permit fee. And let's see, I have a few emails here. Let's see if I can track them all down. Yes. Here's one from David Riggs, who is director of our code office. It says the $35 application fee would be adequate for us to process the permit. This is in reply to Ordinance 11321, which removed the $35 application fee, indicating it would be separate orders under Title I, so on. There was a reply from Jeff McCall, who, let me just read this. I would suggest we move away from the handwritten permit and move it into the IPS permitting system. This would allow the citizen to complete the application online and upload any documentation we require. The permit, once approved, would be accessible by our parking enforcement officers through their handheld unit. The citizen would be issued a virtual permit, but there are additional fees associated with this convenience. The additional cost would be approximately $6, and I believe these transaction fees should be added into the language. So we're talking $35 or $41 or both. Well, I would assume that what we're talking about, as the mayor pointed out a few moments ago to me, would be a system where it would be online for someone who wants to do it that way, or they could go in person to the code office and say, I want a permit. Fill it out there, pay the $35, walk out the door, as opposed to being at home, filling it out online, and getting charged the $35 for the permit and the $6 for the privilege of using your computer. I'm not quite sure how to put that, but anyway. Council,
What's the current fee?
35.
And what does the permit look like physically?
I've never seen one.
Me either. That's why I asked.
Pretty rare. I don't know, I've seen one. I think maybe a window hanger at this point, or,
Here's some indication that is on the vehicle. You know, we had discussed, putting a sticker on the bumper, or we discussed all kinds of things, but there must be some permit that the individual has that's clearly visible so that when parking enforcement's driving around, they recognize that that vehicle has a permit.
Of course, on the other hand, just thinking about this, if it goes virtual, the license plate will be on file. The handheld device would then be able to track it down and say, oh yeah, it's permitted. Oh, no, it's not. Write them a ticket. So, at least I think that'd be the way it would
And
go.
what about in the case where it's, a residence has two vehicles? They get one permit and they alternate.
They can alternate. The way I understand the permit was it's for that vehicle.
It's car specific.
It's
Yeah.
car specific.
Yeah. So you, say for example, you had a bulldozer. You couldn't park your bulldozer and put the tag on it.
Right.
Because it's for your Honda. Does that make sense? Oh, yes.
Okay, yes, the one with the funny name. Okay, so, Sarah Grace, it's too bad she's not here. When I spoke with her some time ago about something else entirely, she happened to mention that on her street, there was someone who had the tags, and so I saw them physically, and they are just, I think they're red, hang tags you put on your mirror. And so, but it is for only one vehicle, and so you can't trade it because it does show. But my concern is, why does it cost an extra $6, and what exactly would that look like? It said something about a virtual something, and I don't know what that means. So I think I'd like to have more information about that. I mean, I think the way it works now, which is lots of complaints about this on Facebook, first of all, nobody knows about it, so it'd be really nice to make it more easily findable on our website. I think that's really important, and make it easier to obtain. And I think that message has perhaps gotten through with this discussion. But as I understand it now, you pay for it, and then you have to go down and pick something up. And it would be nice if it could be all virtual. But if that's, obviously some people can't do that, so you have to give the option. But I'm not clear as to if there's less human activity involved, why would it cost an extra $6? So I want some clarification. I mean, perhaps there's a justification for that, but I'd like to know more about that. So that's where I am with it. Thank you.
Was that a question to the administration?
Yeah, actually.
Okay.
But,
We'll have to look into
yeah.
getting you an answer for that. You know, I believe this came through Lieutenant McCall.
Yeah.
You know, the whole concept of what it's going to cost. And I've not seen it, quite honestly. So we'll certainly have that conversation tomorrow with
If I may, there's a couple departments that have an activity that's necessary to review in order to issue one of these. So the code office has to check several things based upon the way that this body wrote the ordinance. Specifically, there was a requirement to only have one per property. So if there's a duplex on a property, only one or the other side of the duplex can apply for it, not
Right.
duplex entirely. You have to check if there's 0 or 1 parking spaces available at the property. Also, it has to be a permanent resident, and I know that that has been an issue in the past. That's the way that the body wrote the ordinance when it went through originally, and then subsequently updated it, that was a requirement as well. And so the code office is checking those things, and then it subsequently gets passed to parking enforcement in order for the issuance of the permit. And if we go to an electronic system, to where we're looking at license plates, that's going to still need to go to parking enforcement. As far as being able to process that through one interface with the public, that will be a goal of ours, so that 2 different departments can look at it without people having to go to 2 different places. It's just not where we are right now.
On that note, because I've had some conversations with David Riggs about this, and I think that we ought to revisit the process again, because it seems unfair that people who are renters can't have that option again. But I understand that there's a lot of complexity to that, so I think it needs some thought before we move forward, is my opinion on the issue.
Member McCary.
Thank you. I just want to add to the comments about the fee or extra cost of filing online. It sounds similar to the online fee for re-registering your dog license. And I would think that it would be helpful for us to look at similar kinds of permits and see if we can, to what extent we're being consistent with those administrative charges for online processing, or if there are other costs associated with that extra $6 or however much it ends up being. It could be helpful for us to understand that too.
It was a tie between you two, so.
He's younger.
Thank you, Member Eisner. It seems to me that if we want to make this process better, everything needs to be in the computer system, right? So even if somebody chooses to come down here and fill out the form, somebody here then needs to put that information in the computer system, because the police don't want to be looking for the red tags on some cars and being able to scan on the other cars. So I don't know, but my guess is that Lieutenant McCall knows that there is a set fee, that anything that gets added to their thing, I don't think he took $6 out of the air, right? I know that if I'm now going to register myself for adult soccer at the community center, their software currently charges you $4.75 just to run your credit card through the system. So it could be that that's the big chunk, is that it's just if you're going to pay online for this permit, they're automatically charging you, the credit card company or whatever, this much money, and then they have some additional, So I think we need to look at it fully and say, okay, we need everybody to be online, whether they do it in paper because they don't have computer access or not.
Right.
The same fees, and it doesn't surprise me that $35 is what's come up in order to make all these different offices be able to, pay for their administrative. I don't know if, as things get easier, if we're not printing tags anymore, there's a cost there in printing tags. If everything is online and they can just scan it, there's savings in there somewhere. So maybe can we leave it at 35 and not make it 41? I don't know, but that's something we should discuss.
Your turn.
I'd like to return to what Member Spellman said, not only the permanent resident versus renter, but also the duplex issue. Who gets it, first one signed the lease or the other? My point being, I think before we bring this before council for a first reading, there are a lot of things that we need to work out rather than having to go back and amend it and play with it later. It's not a big issue, but let's get it done right the first time rather than having to come back and revisit component parts of this.
Well, I would agree. I don't think we're ready for an ordinance for next week, so we definitely need to we need more detail about the transaction fees and, what the plan is for the computer system and how it's going to operate. So, someone in the audience. Is all council members and administration done?
I'd like to make one last comment. And
All
that
right,
is-
go
Sorry. Thank you, Member Reisner. I'd like to just say that, as I alluded to earlier, there's a number of people that are very unhappy about parking in general, and this is a piece of that, not knowing and making this easier. So I do think, I really want to emphasize it, although we don't have enough information to make a decision now, I'm hoping that we can quickly come to that place, because it would make our citizens happy. Thank you.
Mr. Delay.
I'm Rob Delac, live on Morris Avenue here in the city, and just representing myself. So I agree with Member Spielness and what she just said, absolutely. It's an issue that a lot of people talk about all the time on social media, especially. It's of concern to people, and it would be good to make sure we do this right and make it easier for people. My one question, though, is I can't remember where we're at with this as far as, is it geographically the whole city you can get this tag, or is it certain streets now still, or what's the...
It's my understanding it's still certain streets.
Is it still certain streets?
No.
I don't know.
It's still certain
No.
I thought it was changed.
That was all X'd out.
I thought that was changed.
Yeah, I thought we changed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a bunch of lines through
Oh,
all
yeah.
the streets.
I am 99% certain we changed it.
Mayor.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Initially, it was a pilot to where there were certain streets, just to see how this would actually function as an option.
Yeah, you're right.
Because if we all hop in the Wayback Machine, the reason we had 24-hour parking was, because we were experiencing a lot of storage parking in the city of Athens. And so it went to 24-hour. And then in hearing from citizens who were tired of quote-unquote walking their car every day, which I thought was a clever term, that the 72-hour was to give relief to citizens who do not have off-street parking or have very limited off-street parking, to give them an option to use the 72-hour. And then I believe that City Council did strike the streets that were on there as part of the pilot. But the same requirements are still in place in terms of what is missing. If you do not have off-street parking, that this was a mechanism to relieve that, because they are constantly subject to the 24-hour law in the city of Athens, and this would give them that 72 hours to where they have to walk their vehicle every 72 as opposed to every day.
So can I follow up with that? So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
so, see if I lost my train of thought there. So, so is that a requirement that's in there, that you have to have no on-street parking, or no off-street parking, or not enough for your vehicles, or something? What's the criteria there? Do we know?
0 or 1 space to
Okay.
park a vehicle, because some people have more than 1 vehicle, and they're forced to park on the street with their second vehicle.
Thank you.
Madam President?
I'd just add, people have been unhappy about parking. I came on council in 2008, and parking and trash are the 2 biggest issues that people are unhappy about. So I'm not surprised that people are still unhappy about it. And the only caution I would make is that this is coming before council now because there's a $35 permit fee that for the moment is not in the books. And we're trying to figure out that solution. Now, if we can come up with a timely solution towards renters, other people who are not property owners, I would caution that if you can do it within a few weeks and return it to the next committee meeting with some kind of resolution on it, wonderful. But in the meantime, if you can't, and it's going to need some further discussion, I would urge that you settle the fee, move forward with it, if we can electronically, whatever, and then come back to some of the other questions about policy of who is able to get them.
Sounds reasonable to me. Any other comments on the topic? Well, as you say, it should be done in a timely manner. For myself, I'd like to know when we could come up with a timely manner to figure out how, is it going to be $35 or $41 or electronic or paper? So is that going to require another committee meeting 2 weeks from now, or can the administration come up with some suggestions to pass to us?
We will. City administration can come up with suggestions for that and get, as I mentioned, I'll get the details as to where that amount came from.
Okay.
I suspect the $6 is a convenience fee that is really a pass-through for IPS. But that's the company working with us on the parking meters, and then also the enforcement of these with the license plate readers on our parking enforcement vehicle.
Okay.
I was just going to say in regards to the trash rate thing, I met, since it's our committee, I met with Director Stone, Mr. Riggs, Andrew Cca. We worked it all around the conference table. They ran the numbers and sent it back to us. What did we meet with Stone for, about 45 minutes? And then you folks did the homework and had it back to us in no time.
That's a good model. Okay, next item. The 2022 annual paving. That's my favorite topic. Which we do every year. That's why it's annual. And this is a list of the recommended for annual paving below. Armitage Row, Chip Seal, Banbury, Cook Drive, Courier Street, Elliott, Highland Upper Section, Kern Street, North Congress, Carpenter to State, Palmer Street, Smith Street, Bard to Union, Stewart Street, East Union South, looks like 465 feet, 682 Path pending railroad and ODOT approval. Alternate streets if funding allows, Fern Alley, State to number 13, Hickory, Mulligan to Dead End, Stewart Loop by Gammerfeld Hall, that was Gammerfelder, Wallace, and Watt Morris to Stimson. And this is from our assistant engineer. How much is that going to cost?
We're asking for $500,000 to be appropriated for this, $250,000 from the 220 fund and $250,000 from the 572 fund.
How many miles will this be?
I'll have to calculate that. I don't have that information right now.
It'd be handy to know. I kind of like to know how much per mile we're spending. Are we going to try to get OU in on this? I know we've done it before in the past where they were going to do a big bunch of paving and we were going to do a big bunch, and if we all went together, we would get a discount because we're buying in volume.
This year, that's not the plan.
Okay. No, it's too bad. Member of council, committee?
What, just out of curiosity, what is the process, and we don't need to get, deep into the weeds, but what is the process that goes into identifying which streets get attention in a particular year?
Remember, Swank, there's a system-level analysis that's done annually that assigns a condition value to every street in the city. Initially, and I started this back when I was actually the street director prior to being the city engineer, so it would have been in the 2004 timeframe when we started this process. We used the ODOT pavement condition rating system, which is a 0 to 99 value. Several years into using that system, we found that it was too detailed for the level of information that we needed, and so we changed it to a 0 to 10 value process, and then subsequently ranking them annually through inspections that typically take place in the February timeframe, and then spit out, all of the streets in the city. Subsequently, we'll go and pull from those, and typically ones on the worst end of the spectrum, and bounce that across like other considerations. For instance, Is there a water line or sewer line that may need done on that street in the next couple of years, which would cause it to need to be delayed? Is there some other reason, pedestrian consideration, something else, that might cause it to need to be done sooner? And then kind of juggle things around and then spit out basically a list of the streets that we're going to go and put in. And we typically spend anywhere between $300,000 and $700,000 in a given year on annual paving.
Do we try to group those, along those criteria somewhat geographically, so we're not jumping all over portions of the city?
No, and the reason for that is there's, every ward, members of every ward have interest in having paving happening in their section of the city. And so, while we don't try to spread it around to ensure that there's absolutely every ward has at least something paved, ideally we do, and we try to follow that pavement condition rating template, because that's something that we've done now for about 17 years. So, we're trying to stay consistent with, that methodology advice, because somebody yelled the loudest. That's what got added to the list. Instead, try to, follow this process.
Thanks. Other questions from the committee? Other members of council? Member Spillness.
Thank you. So the first one was Armitage, and it said spit and seal or something like that. What is that?
Chip seal.
Chip seal. What does that mean?
So that's a process where there's an emulsion that's sprayed on the surface, and then chipped rock is placed on top of that emulsion. It's typically what would be done in a township road setting. Armitage Road is both in the city and out of the city. And so there's a portion that has maintenance responsibility of Athens Township. There's a portion that has maintenance responsibility of Athens City. What we tend to do is try to line up repairs to that particular road or any of the roads that we have that are chip and seal in the city. And there's only a couple portions of Hooper Street, I think, and I have to think about a couple other places. But bottom line is there's not very many. And then what we'll do is we'll split the cost with the township when the township is doing it. And so I believe this year that's what is happening. And so Athens Township will do their portion and the city will do our portion.
I do have one other question, and that is, so of course for short streets, and many of these are, there's some consistency in how bad one portion is to another. There are other streets who are very long, and one part may be really bad, but the rest is fine. So how do you assess streets like that?
The pavement condition rating tool, is not it's somewhat of a blunt instrument in order to get a systems level view. If there are particular areas that, for whatever reason, there's significant differences between one section to another section of the street, we'll break them up. For instance, this year, I think North Congress Street specifically, or Congress Street, has just a section because it had been broken into a couple different sections for rating purposes. If there's something that's not broken into sections, we typically wouldn't break it into sections in order to evaluate. Usually it has to do with the type of pavement, whether it's composite pavement or just straight asphalt or what have you. In instances where the majority of the street is in good shape, but there might be a couple areas of distress, the crew will identify that and do patching on it, basically where you grind out sections and patch it, vice a total overlay.
Okay, because I believe that was the decision I heard for University Estates Boulevard.
Sure. So University Estates Boulevard is a street that has received a significant amount of attention from the city over the last 15 years. That portion in the front has experienced a bit more distress than maybe some of the other portions, and I think some of that has to do primarily with some of the underlying base drainage in that particular area, as well as some truck traffic during construction of some of the buildings at the front portion of University Estates. So I think the intent of the street crew this year is to do patching in the front boulevard portion of University Estates Boulevard to hit some of those areas of the worst distress.
Thank you.
Member McCary.
I'll try and be quick with these. I am assuming, Director Stone, that these projects would comply with our complete streets objectives.
So this is repaving.
Okay.
This is not rebuilding.
Okay.
So in no case are we going to widen a street on this section of projects in order to add lanes or add something else. If there is opportunities for restriping in instances, although I don't believe that any of these are marked roadways, let me double check, Congress is. Congress includes a bike lane right now. But to your point about complete streets, can you make the question a little bit more specific to this list? Is there something in particular that you're interested in?
Sure. For instance, accessibility curbs.
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So in instances where there aren't proper ramps for accessibility, that's been our policy for a long time, is during paving, we'll go ahead and replace the existing, bullnose curb with a proper ramp in the vicinity of the streets that are being paved. So yeah, that's absolutely a case. But as far as like widening to add sidewalks where they don't exist now, or widening to add bike lanes where they don't exist now, that is not part of annual paving, because annual paving is really a maintenance activity.
Thank you. And then the rating process, which sounds very detailed and appropriate, is it similar at all to the rating process for sidewalks?
No,
No.
no. So the rating process for sidewalks basically is like a stoplight, red, amber, green, and black. With black being it doesn't exist, red, amber, green being red is in significant distress, amber is somewhat in distress, and green is in good shape. This is a 0 to 10 scale, as I mentioned, loosely based upon the 0 to 99 scale that ODOT uses for pavement condition ratings. So if you wanted to get into the specifics on cracking and types of distress in asphalt, I could probably sit down with you and go through some of that. Probably is a little bit too long for this this setting.
Thank you. And the last one is, do we have a philosophy behind incorporating public demand into those equations at all when it comes to what streets get prioritized? Or is it really, are we just trying to be as rational and objective as possible?
Sure. The correct answer is we attempt to be as rational and objective as possible. As all of us know, there are periods of time where there's a significant amount of outcry for a particular area. We tried to, at least the guidance to me when I started from Service Safety Director Wayne Key, who's now passed away, was stop listening to people yelling about what needs to be paved and come up with an objective system on evaluating the entire city. And so that's what we've attempted to do. Obviously people, just like in all instances in government, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but we really try to avoid that.
Thank you.
Member Crow.
Director Stone, what is 682 path?
Sure. So the development called Kershaw Green, which is the apartment complexes that are going in at the intersection of University Estates Boulevard or Lord Road and 682. The developer intends to give the city funds in order to connect the development to the city bike and pedestrian infrastructure. That was one of the things that during Planning Commission we gave direction to them, and we said you need to connect to the infrastructure, and they came back to us and basically said, hey, look, it would be difficult for us to deal with the railroad, to deal with the State Highway Department on 682. Can we just give you money to do it? And so we believe that between city forces, a contractor to do an initial grading, and then doing paving in conjunction with annual paving, we'll be able to do a proper shared use path that will connect that development to the Hockhocking-Medina Bikeway spur that goes to, basically crosses on the old railroad bridge over there on the West State, from the West State Park into the area where the wetlands are, then goes up to Armitage Road. But basically, we'll connect there, and the paving portion of that, I'd like to do with annual paving. That was the way we're going to skin that cat rather than make a separate project, basically.
So I'm just curious, this doesn't connect to Armitage, it's not a path that will, they're gonna have to cross 682 at some
Correct.
point, right?
They will.
So are we concerned about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, we've got a location based upon Sally's review of the situation, and then also working with ODOT District 10, what's the least worst spot to cross. You know, and it's going to be in, near the railroad, but not at the railroad, crossing of 682. And then ultimately getting a permit from the railroad to cross the railroad right away, because the railroad was there first, you know, before anything. So they have like preeminent rights, right? And then connecting to the path along the other old railroad embankment that the city owns, just west of the existing kind of S-curve portion of the bikeway spur.
Thank you.
Member Ziff.
Thank you. I'm sitting here peering at Google Maps, and
Never do that.
maybe I missed something, but I'm slightly confused as to why we have to put that in. That path going across 682 to that, because there's already a section of the bike path that connects to Armitage Road. There's already a path that makes that connection, so I don't see necessarily and maybe you can just explain and enlighten me. But
Yeah, maybe it would be better for us to sit down outside of this meeting and look at a couple drawings. I mean, the bottom line is that this apartment complex is going to be, you know, over 150 units of, you know, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So we expect there to be families. We expect there to be children and such. And you know, if you're building a new, you know, high density facility in the city of Athens, you need to connect to the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And so the connection in our minds will be a more rapid connection to get to the High Cognita Bikeway, the West 8th Street Park, and other points inside the city, vice going up Armitage Road, up the hill, past Little Fish, then back down to the hill to then hit the bike path and then come back and go around. So it's a more direct way. You know, ultimately, my experience is that people, if there's an indirect way to go somewhere, people choose not to use it. They go the direct way. And so this is the most direct way that we would hope would get used by the residents that will choose to live at this facility.
cool.
Members of the audience?
Rob Delac, Morris Avenue here in the city, speaking for myself. So it sounds like Christmas to me. This is great. This connection, I think, is going to be very valuable. But one question I was going to ask was what sidewalk improvements might be included in the street projects this year? And it sounds like there is one here, but there might be curb cuts potentially added as well. Is there anything else sidewalk-wise that might be included in this that you can think of or you know of off the top of your head?
I can't answer that.
No? Okay. Oh, I'm not supposed to ask administration directly?
Well, you could.
Oh.
You just did.
I mean, you're a citizen. I can't stop you from.
Okay.
It's not part of this ordinance, but I would anticipate there'll be quite a few sidewalk improvements that will happen this year.
That's good to know. So I'm serving on the ad hoc pedestrian accessibility committee, and so that's on my mind, of course. We just met with the engineers, EPW, today, and so lots of good stuff going on. Good to hear this. So I do have the complete streets thing, just to mention that there's the possibility whenever you repave that there might, if you look at the bike ped master plan, maybe there was a planned recommended bike lane that could be added without any additional cost except for some paint. So I think that's the kind of thing that Member McCary was thinking about when talking about complete streets and repaving. There's those sort of low-hanging fruit or easily attainable changes to the infrastructure that can happen at almost no cost in some of these situations. Now, you've already talked, Director Stone, you've already talked about how there's probably not any streets on that list that in this case get to that, but it's good just to keep that in mind, and that's what I think, good point by Member McCary. You want to interject here?
Oh.
Yes, just to note that I believe that Service Safety Director Stone was the one who got the Congress Avenue bicycle lane on, and it was using exactly that plan. So he's modest about it, but he's done it before, and I know that he and his crew will be, I'm very confident that if they see something, they'll
Sounds
work on
good.
that.
So I just wanted to clarify that point. Chip and seal. Armitage Road, I have some concern about that. It happened 5 years ago when I first got here. And I ended up interacting with the township that was doing the chip and seal because it's a huge issue for cyclists. So chip and seal is loose gravel, basically, at first at least. After a while, the loose stuff gets pushed off by car traffic, and it becomes a solid pavement again. But when it's loose gravel, it is a treacherous place to ride a bicycle. And so I had contacted the township to see what was going on about this chip and seal, and they actually made some slight adjustment to what they would normally do to try and make it a little safer for cyclists by sweeping it more quickly. And so that's just an extra step that they said they could do, and they went and did that, and it was a big change. It really helped a lot. So I just like to plant that seed that when working with them on Armitage, because it is an important cycling connector, if you come off the bikeway there, then unless you're going directly to Little Fish, if you're going to ride somewhere outside town, which a lot of people do, that's a treacherous place to ride then. And it's usually weeks or a month or so it's bad, but that's long enough in the middle of the summer to be a huge barrier to especially road cyclists. So just if you could keep that in mind, I'd appreciate that.
We can. I mean, that's a great suggestion. We can work with the township.
And it was just,
And
I think-
we have a great partnership with the township, you know, to where, as Director Stone was just saying, that, you know, to work on a project like this jointly and covering the costs. You know, they don't have line line painting equipment in the township, and so a lot of times we'll cover some of that if they cover some of the chip and seal.
Yeah, it was a great
partnership
relationship to be able to do
with the
that, so
township.
I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, if there's nothing further, then that concludes the Transportation Committees.
Thank you, Councilmember Reisner. We'll now have Finance and Personnel, and that's chaired by Councilmember Crowell, joined by Councilmembers Reisner, Ziff, and Spielness.
Thank you, President Isley. We have a number of items on our agenda tonight, starting, the first two are related. The first item tonight is the local tax amnesty. This would be proposed as a one-reading resolution. The amnesty refers to penalties and fees for people who owe back income taxes, penalties and interest for those who owe back income tax. So there would be a 1-month amnesty in the month of June where citizens could take advantage of having those penalties or interest waived in order to get up to speed, on their what they owe for income taxes. And we'll get into the related ordinance next. Does the auditor have anything to add to the tax amnesty resolution?
Not really. I mean, you explained it, a 1-month amnesty for people to come forward. I guess most of the people here didn't live through this 10 years ago when we did it, so I don't know if anybody has any questions for me about that. It's I just think one thing I want to make clear is that people move to Athens, they don't realize we have a local income tax. Not every place you live has that. One of our first clients who came forward 10 years ago had been in Athens about 7 years and lived here about 3 years before he realized that we had a local income tax, and then he didn't know what to do, was probably kind of worried or afraid to come forward. And so then when we ran this amnesty, he came right in about it. Most people want to pay they just don't know if they owe taxes. And most people pay their income taxes through their employer. And if they don't have any other types of income or second job or anything like that, they don't owe us. But there are some forms of income that people don't realize is taxable, and they don't think about it because they're already having local income tax withheld by their employer. And so it's an opportunity for them to come forward. I think we all understand that I'm paying my fair share. We all need to pay our fair share for the services we receive from the city through our local income tax. We need this probably more than ever now with the reduction of income taxes that are going to be coming in the next several years. So it's really the fair thing to do, though, is for everybody to pay their fair share. So the amnesty is just a way for people to just come forward. We help them and do whatever we can. We offer payment plans and things like that to help them get caught up. And then once they do come forward, they get an account number in our system, and they can pay annually, not have the burden of paying several years at a time, et cetera, and then that moves forward.
Thank you, Auditor. So this amnesty program is an incentive, really, to get people caught up, and I think it's a very good idea. Are there any questions from the committee on this amnesty one reading resolution? Yes, Member Reisner.
Yeah, I was here when we did it the first time. And I remember, in addition to that, there was a program to try to collect back taxes, people who have been owing for several years and just simply, I'm not going to pay, or can't track them down. And we had there was a company in Cleveland, I'm trying to think of this name.
That's our next step.
That's our next
Okay.
That's kind of, the amnesty is helpful as a precursor to that, to help people get in our system. And then basically, as you said, it's run by the city of Cleveland. It's called Central Collection Agency, and it's a collection agency. It's a government collection agency, and they have access because of the size of Cleveland. It's a special access that not every city, we couldn't get this to people's federal income tax returns. And so we do the amnesty, we clean up our records, our accounts, and then we turn a list over to them, and they can go in and see if people who file the federal return, but they aren't in our system, and that they have income on there that should be reported that wasn't. And like I said, it's pretty much always because they didn't know. You just don't always think of it.
Right.
And so, it's a collection agency. They send out the letters. People who get a letter respond to them. Occasionally, somebody, they don't really owe anything, but there aren't complete records in the federal system to tell that. And so they might just ask for copies of their last 3 years of W-2s and things like that. But a lot of times there is other income, like part-time income, that people didn't realize that they should be paying taxes on. And so, like I said, the Central Collection Agency, CCA, works with them, gets them caught up, and then turns the information over to us so that we can follow up, and we have them in our system moving forward. So yeah, you're exactly right about that.
Just one other comment. Is there anything that the city can do in the situation where you have people who live in the city? No question about it, they're residents, but they work outside of the city, and their employer is under no obligation whatsoever to deduct our city income tax. I mean, they just simply say, well, I don't have to do it, it's just an added expense to me. You take care of it, it's your problem. Now, school district is the other way around. But the school district, by God, you are going to pay, and you will deduct it from your employee's salary, no matter where they work. They're going to collect it. The law says you will, and they do. But for some reason, a municipality can't do that.
You're right. Our jurisdiction is the city of Athens. So, for example, my husband worked in Canal Winchester, and they did not withhold our income tax for him, and that had to be paid separately. There are other entities outside the city who will withhold, but we have no authority to make them do that. We do have the authority to require any business or agency within the city to withhold taxes for their employees. But we just don't have the authority.
Okay. We need our state representative to change that.
Well, it would make it easier for the employees too, if they didn't have to deal with that on their own and just had it withheld automatically. But as I said, we can't do anything about that.
Other questions specifically on the amnesty, on the 1-month amnesty that we are offering or proposing? Okay, well, we're bleeding into the next, anyone else have any comments? Administration, okay, citizens. The next item on our agenda, which is this CCA program, and I'll just note that the auditor provided us some helpful descriptions of these programs in a document on our drive. The amnesty program they last did ended up collecting about almost $50,000 from 20 or 30 citizens who came forward to be a part of that amnesty program. And then following that, the second item on our agenda tonight, working with the CCA, the City of Cleveland, to collect the delinquent taxes. In 2012, the auditor notes that they received a total of over $300,000 in outstanding taxes. So that is obviously a benefit to us to be working with this collection agency. So in order to move this forward, in a timely manner, we need this CCA program to start after the amnesty period, so after June, so starting in July, which means that we need to pass this ordinance by late June. So that's why we're introducing this proposed legislation now to work with this third-party delinquent income tax collection agency. Are there any questions from the committee on the second agenda item? Other members of council? Citizens, administration, mayor?
I'm glad you mentioned the revenue that was collected through CCA in that first year, but it went on for 3 years. And if I'm not mistaken, the third year, it just kept, kind of dropping down in terms of revenue being brought back into the city's revenues. And I think it was
It's about
somewhere.
200,000 the first year, about 70,000 the next year, and then, as you said, and there was some that still came in after that. But the total we saw in our system, we didn't really renew the program with them and ask them to send another round of letters or anything like that. That's revenue that came in from that first year of working with them. So there will be a contract. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's anything else about that or actual revenue, but there'll be a contract with the ordinance that goes through. Their share, we don't pay them anything, but they keep 25%. It wasn't that much 10 years ago, but it's 25% now for their efforts. But this is money we would never be able to find otherwise. We don't have access to people's federal returns, and there's just no way we could find these taxpayers. We don't have mandatory filing in the city of Athens either. And so it's, 75% of something we would never have otherwise.
I'll just note that if I remember correctly, some of the correspondence that's used is from the city of Cleveland, and it's a little bit bizarre. I mean, at first you look at it and you say, oh, what is this? This is not for me, but it is.
We have people call and say, is this for real or a scam?
Right.
And understandably, and I would almost expect more people to do that now with the way things have increased in that regard. But yes, my files, I keep a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of newspaper articles, PSAs. We do it on our local government channel website. I did an interview, and we try to put as much information out there over and over again so people know that this is going on. And we help them. We'll fill out the forms. Our city tax returns are a one-page form. It's pretty easy, and it's all information that you put on your federal return. It's not a lot of new information you have to come up with, but it just needs to be filed. And so we we're happy to help with that. But they would have to deal with the collection agency to begin with. The other thing about using CCA, when I was on council, we approved for the auditor's office to use a collection agency. But because it's income tax information, it's considered confidential. And they're very limited in what they can do to collect income tax from people. You can't leave phone messages or anything like that, and it's all done by mail, and it's just you're limited because of the confidentiality of the information that you're dealing with. You can't talk to anyone else about it. You have to get the person that owes, and that's it. And so it's just very helpful to go through the CCA because it's basically the city of Cleveland who collects their own income taxes, and they understand all those rules.
Thank you, Auditor. Okay, yes, Mayor.
I just want to share, when we went through this program several years ago, there were, individuals who did receive the infamous green envelope. And then working with CCA, sometimes it was just documents that they wanted to see, and therefore the individuals, in fact, did not owe anything, and it was corrected and moving forward. So I just wanted to get that out there for the viewing audience tonight, because, that could happen this around as well, where someone gets a letter, and then it'll detail the information that they are looking for, and by providing that, like I said, a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes the individuals actually do not owe, because there was missing documents.
Can I follow up on that? Yes, and the other thing about it is these people aren't avoiding paying their taxes. They don't realize they owe. Some of them might be paying us some taxes, but they aren't paying us, for some of their other income and things like that. So it's, and as I said, the person who moved here, and that was 3 years before he realized we had a local income tax and things like that. It's not because they're trying not to pay their taxes. It's just, but this is our way to find them and let them know that we do have this local income tax.
Thank you. Okay, moving on our agenda, we have appropriations, and the first three items listed under appropriations are all to individual funds to cover annual insurance premiums. So this is the $1,610 to the cemetery fund, $100 to the CDBG formula grant fund, and $4,200 to the recreation fund. Yeah, that's all I have. Are there any questions from the committee on this appropriation? Other members of council, citizens, administration?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna bring that up. I'm gonna ask soon for an additional appropriation to the cemetery fund for electric. It's in the TC 300s as well. So it's possible that, going forward, it's not an emergency, but as a way to avoid additional ordinances. And that's something that we just discovered today.
This is a utility bill, or this is?
Utility bill.
Okay.
Utility bill is that just we didn't put enough in the budget for what is coming cost-wise on electric for the cemetery.
Okay.
That was just something we discovered today, and I just caught it here, so as this was coming through, if you'd like to add it prior to the ordinance going through, we can do that, or we can wait another 2 weeks and bring it up as a separate appropriation.
I'm fine adding it now. Is the committee okay with that?
Fine with me.
About $750
Okay.
more.
President Isley, are you comfortable with that?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Director Stone. Okay, moving on to the next appropriation. Speaking of paying our utility bills, the appropriation of $2,500 to the Armory, which we all know quite well, for an electric bill, but also for a building that the city owns on Hudson Avenue in Athens. And this is a storage facility. And we have a utility costs for obviously both the Armory and this storage facility. And so we need this appropriation to pay our utility bills. Are there any questions from the committee on Armory or Hudson, other members of council, citizens, administration, anything to add?
I'll have to go back and check. This might need a transfer as well. because I don't believe there's anything in the unappropriated balance in the Armory and Hudson Fund. I have to double check though, but I think that was the other part of this particular item. I may be incorrect on that, but I don't know.
My notes say 2,000 was budgeted, but need to add this.
You're correct.
Okay, yeah, I remember when this came up a couple weeks ago, we kind of talked about it. Bottom line is, there's no money in the unappropriated balance, because there's no revenue
Right.
that goes into the Armory Fund or the Hudson Fund unless there's a transfer from another fund. So that would be fine.
Okay, so transfer will be part of this. Okay, and the last item under appropriations, we were informed, thanks to the careful eyes of the mayor's office, that while we, Member Grace's Planning and Development Committee had authorized the $45,000 for the Sunday Creek Horizons add-on contract for the Armory project, we never appropriated the money. So this will be coming through now to appropriate the $45,000 to the American Rescue Plan Act Fund as per the ordinance we have already passed. Are there any questions from committee members on this? Other council members, citizens, administration? Okay, now we do have a couple of additional items added to the Finance and Personnel Committee agenda, sort of at the later moments. One is that we have recently learned, and I don't have a lot of information on this, so I'll be turning to Director Stone, that there are additional repairs that need to be done for the fire department headquarters. Director Stone, you want to fill us in on that?
I can. So, as this body knows, we've been spending money to try to keep the existing fire department headquarters glued together, for the next couple years. And the engineer that did the design for the repairs and stabilization basically evaluated an additional section, provided that information about what was necessary to the contractor that's working on it. The contractor just returned a quote over the weekend to Chief Reimer for an additional $17,500 to basically repair concrete and stabilize rebar and concrete both in the ramp in front, more locations in the ramp in the front of the building. So that's the quote. It's not an emergency, but if you were able to add it onto this, they can keep the contractor moving once this appropriations ordinance were to go through.
I think it makes sense to me.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Other members of the committee, any comments on $17,500 for additional repairs to the fire headquarters on Columbus Road? Other members of council, Member Swank.
Director Stone, none of us have a crystal ball, and they're hoping that all of these things will get us to the point where we're out of that building and into a brand new structure. It'll last us for 50, 75, maybe 100 years. Any idea what the next 2 years are going to, or however many years it's going to look like? Do they anticipate that we might have to spend more money on this thing?
Sure. Member Swank, the goal of this project that's been happening, at the fire station right now was specifically a stabilization in order to buy, just a couple more years of time. I'm, cautiously optimistic that based upon this additional due diligence that we did when that contractor got in and actually started doing the work and found the additional areas of distress, and then we evaluated them, that this will be sufficient to get us an extra couple years at that facility. It's important to note that facility is not suitable in the long term. Again, putting 100,000-pound vehicles on the second floor of a building is a terrible idea. Especially a building that's pushing 60 years old. But it's I believe that this work, once it's completed, will stabilize it and buy the time necessary to get out of that building, assuming the other timelines hold.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other comments? Okay, the last item on our agenda tonight is a staffing item. This committee has heard from Director Stone about plans to reorganize the Athens Fire Department. restructuring with a single captain and lieutenants and firefighters, which is very similar to what the Athens Police Department sort of structure has. Lots of reasons for this at this time, mostly people, captains leaving and retiring and the opportunity to do something. And we've already discussed it, but I know it was asked to be put on the agenda again tonight. Director Stone, you want to fill us in on the current updates?
Sure. I believe the HR director provided 2 of the 3 ordinances to the clerk, specifically a modification to the staffing ordinance that changes the number of captains from 3 to 1, changes the number of lieutenants from 3 to 6, and then ultimately adds, and then it, get this right, decreases the number of firefighters by 3 for those lieutenants that would then add, but then also adds 1 firefighter to even out the shift. So at the end of the day, there'll be 1 extra person in the department per the staffing ordinance. There will be an MOU, that's the second ordinance that we go through that modifies Article 24, the AFD contract, which is command pay. I believe that has already been forwarded. The portion that I don't believe that you have in your possession yet is a modification to the non-union pay and benefits ordinance that talks about the existing fire captain's position changing from a 2496 position to a 2080 position. That is to say the number of hours per given year. And then there's a series of places where that's referred to in the non-union pay and benefits ordinance, and those modifications would have to happen. So those are the things that would come forward. And I know we talked about it before. HR Director Lucas had a family emergency and actually ended up having to leave last week for several days, and he's still out of the office right now. And so, I'm working to pull together the last bits of information and get to this body in preparation for introducing legislation.
Thank you, Director Stone. Any questions from the committee on the fire department reorganization? Other members of council? Citizens? Heard from administration. That ends finance and personnel. Thank you, President Weiser.
Thank you, Member Crowell. We'll now move on to City and Safety Services, and that's chaired by Councilmember McCary and joined by Council Members Swank and Crowell.
All right, we're ready to get started. The first item on our agenda is Community Development Block Grant. Looks like it's application season time, and it's an opportunity for us to hear an update, I believe, on potential target areas for this grant, but I'll ask Director Stone.
I don't have a lot of information on this. And there's a meeting this Friday with the CDBG personnel from HAPCAP that we use, where we're going to go through several different iterations of looking at potential programs through CDBG and what projects might fit said programs and be competitive. One of the challenges with CDBG is they want it to fit their perfect criteria that they want, and so melding your project to fit the criteria that the program offers, both the allocation as well as some of the other what they call allocation fees, which is kind of a standard amount that localities get, but then some of the other programs that are out there as well, like the critical infrastructure programs and the I forget some of the other names.
RPIG.
Yeah, RPIG and a few other ones, and then they sometimes make recommendations of leveraging your allocation money against some of the other programs. So it's really kind of a little bit of a kabuki dance to get funded through CDBG, and we're going to use HAPCAP as the agency to do that. I believe there'll be a public meeting as part of this process, and I think that's one of the intents of this legislation going through is to hold a public meeting in conjunction with the legislation when it goes through, like in this count as the public meeting, basically.
Just to check my understanding then, this is not so much a situation where we are dreaming up our ideal programs and projects and then asking for the money. We're instead looking at what they're most inclined to fund and then trying to come up with projects that fit that criteria?
Yeah, it's kind of a both,
Okay.
right? I mean, we know what some needs are and what a lot of needs are in the city, obviously, because we manage it every day. And then also there's the needs that come forward from the community as well. And in many cases, those overlap. And then our goal is to try to kind of meld them to turn them into something that is fundable and is competitive with that program. For instance, the Critical Infrastructure Program is a CDBG program. Two projects that we went after a couple times to get funded, and then eventually did get funded, were the Depot Street lift station and the dewatering facility at, to make sure, I think we did get that, the dewatering improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. Again, two things that are terribly unsexy and nobody really cares about it until they don't work. And so that's a type of project that is in the suite of CDBG funding programs that's out there.
All right. Thanks. I'll open it up to questions from committee members. Other council members? Administration? And our audience, yes.
Hat trick today. Rob Barbadilak. I said my full last name again. Robert Delac, 124 Morris Avenue here in the city. So I'm thinking about last year's CDBG funding. There was a public meeting like we just talked about, and there were some projects that I think are underway or maybe have already been accomplished, but I was curious if the administration can talk about what those were so we have an idea of what we've done recently. So it was the 2nd Street stair removal, sidewalk placement with CDBG funds, or was that other funds used for that?
Yeah, it was done, so we just did that.
Because I remember that was on the list last year, but that was other funds, okay. How about the West State Street sidewalk project that's sort of in the works? Is that
It's under
CDBG?
design right now. That
Okay.
was previous year's allocation, or 2 years' worth of allocation is kind of committed toward that, and it's under design right now. One of the challenges in that particular project, if you really want to get in the weeds, is there are a couple slips that are causing some of the sidewalk distress that involve a significant amount of space outside of the public right-of-way. And so how do you deal with that in those situations, particularly when this includes private property and structures? So it could really grow that cost, and how we're going to solve that problem is the thing that they're looking at here.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So my comment about that is a sexy program, I think. That's good work that we need done here, so good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Or, yes, administration?
I mean, I can list another great project that was a CDBG project, which was the rubberized surface at Southside Park underneath the playground equipment. That was, I believe, about $49,000 that went towards putting ADA accessible rubberized surface there.
Grant Street was a CDBG project.
Grant Street.
2008. There is a booster station project happening at the Kimes Reservoir right now. It's a current CDBG project, allocation project that's going on. It's getting close to the end. So.
All right, thank you. We'll stop with that topic and move on to fireworks, amending city code to add a definition and reaffirm ban on discharge. It's my understanding that this is an opportunity to clarify an omitted definition that will clarify our expectations for the use of fireworks within city limits. So do we have any additional comments on any changes coming with our expectations for what's allowed with fireworks in Athens? My understanding is that there's not a big change in any what's permitted, just that we need to add a definition. Councilmember Swank, yes.
Yeah, a couple questions. The first deals with, do we have a process for special events? Obviously, we have the 4th of July fireworks, and that's something we'd count on, year in and year out. But if there were, like, if Ohio University had a special event and wanted to do fireworks, homecoming, do we have a process for that?
We do. It goes through the police chief, or the fire chief.
Fire chief permits them.
Permits those. Copperheads games will have fireworks, the city's firework display. I'd like to go back real quick to kind of your opening comment on that. I mean, there has been a major change, and that's happened at the state level, to where they have basically deregulated the commercial fireworks to where they can be purchased and lit off. Where what this ordinance is doing is putting in language to where we're restricting that use. And because I would contend that the last place you want to have unregulated fireworks of that scale going off is in a city that's over 222 years old and has a rather large population of individuals who could be letting these off just about anywhere.
And of note, I'm sorry, sir, of note, there's not preemption in the state law like there is in so many other state laws, and that municipalities are allowed to further regulate, which is unique in the legislative times that we live from the state of Ohio. But it does take a affirmative step from a municipality to do that, and that's what this is.
Okay, thank you.
So the second part of that question, I think you two both addressed it. D1, a county with respect to may do either of the following. One, restrict the dates and times a person may discharge, ignite, or explode fireworks purchased pursuant to this section. In other words, the way I read this, our friends in Columbus have allowed us to exercise home rule in this case.
Go figure.
Okay, that was going to be my second question, so all three of us affirmed that.
All right. Excellent. Councilmember Crowell?
Thank you, Member McCary. The definition, what is the definition that will be added?
I believe that's information that our law director can provide us with, but I don't have the definition right now, I don't believe.
Okay.
Other questions at this time? We'll otherwise be seeing this come forward with that additional information. Looks like this is an effort to keep us safe, and I'm supportive of that. Any other questions? Yes.
Just in some of the information that was relayed back and forth, that we were going to get input from the police and fire chief.
Yes.
And we do have that, or?
It's my understanding that we have support from our police and fire chief for maintaining.
Okay, and then that's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was just, I think, good communication strategy to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
Any other questions? Then that will conclude our City and Safety Services Committee meeting.
Okay, and our last committee meeting of the night is Planning and Development. And we have council members Crowell, McCary, and Swank. Do I have that right? No, you're not. I'm sorry. Spielness. I'm sorry. Say S words, I'm sorry. Okay, and Councilmember Grace is not here to chair the meeting tonight. We do have two applications, and council members have received copies of the applications from Ohio Valley Museum, and this is a special use right-of-way for 67 Columbus Road, and this is to request 27 parking spaces. And the other use of right-of-way is for Windstream Kentucky Data, and that's 55 feet of utility conduit in the right-of-way. And we do have maps and showing, and I do believe there was some question on the Ohio Valley Museum. Councilmember Spielness, did you have a question about the 27 additional parking spaces?
Thank you, President Isley. I looked at the map and I thought, boy, I'm not sure exactly where this is, and I went over and drove around and looked at it, and I thought, I'm not sure what all those things on the map actually mean. So there's yellow stripes that I'm assuming is not parking, and then those pink stripes that I think are parking. But I'm trying to figure out exactly where they're talking about as I looked at it, because there's a steep slope there, and I had some difficulty figuring out where exactly those spots really are. Because there's a fair amount, it looks like it extends the parking that's already existing, which is fine, but I wasn't completely clear. I don't have a problem with it. I'm assuming that there's some logic to this. It's just hard from the drawing to figure out exactly where these are, to me, anyway.
Mayor Patterson.
I'm familiar with this project. And interestingly, the current parking lot of the former church, now Obi Mod, is within the public right-of-way already. It's a wide public right-of-way through here. And they just want to be able to repave the parking lot area and restripe it. But that requires, again, going through the use of public right-of-way process for them.
So just out of curiosity, what are the yellow striping? Do you know?
That might just be the boundary of the property itself. I don't know for sure what that is.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not very clear. I mean, if those pink little angles are extending to where the parking is, you know, I don't have a problem with that. It seems reasonable, and if what you just said is true, it's no big deal at all.
I can find out what the yellow markings are. Again, to me, it appears to be the boundary of that property itself. But I can double check.
Yes, Councilmember Crowell?
Thank you, President Isley. Just to, point of clarification, I believe it's 29 spaces, not 27. And some of the information that Director Riggs included reads, it appears that the current plan has 11 spaces located completely on private property with 29 spaces partially or completely in the public right-of-way. So it's those that I think have to come through council in order to be restriped. But to your point, Member Spielness, I have no idea what the colors on the map are. It's, I mean, the yellow almost looks like parking spaces, but
Yeah,
I
it
don't
does.
believe
That's-
that's.
And I don't think it is.
I think
but-
it's just the, I didn't count them. Member Swank, can you count those? The pink ones? Are there 29 of them? Maybe President Isley counted the
I don't know, no, I
spots.
didn't. I can't take credit for it. Yes, okay, and we have questions from 2 council members and then a public member. So Councilmember Ziff, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, President. I didn't actually have a question. I'm pretty sure just looking at this, you know, here I am, second time tonight using Google Maps. But the yellow stripings on there, I think pretty clearly are just, you know, denoting where the right-of-way exists currently. Because that's right along the road and all that down there. And then obviously I think the pink would be parking spaces in this large, sort of, according to the satellite view, this large already slightly paved area that would get extended, I think.
Members, if I see the ROW
Yeah,
now in
ROW
yellow
around
for
there.
right-of-way, so you must be correct.
I don't know if I must be correct, but
Well.
maybe I am.
Okay,
I'm following you, man.
thank you. Okay, Councilmember Swank?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the founders of the museum, oh gosh, within the last 10 days, and a couple things. One, they just received another huge chunk of money and are currently reaching out all over southeast Ohio to bring lots of people to town. This could be a potential economic driver, not to mention a great educational opportunity for underserved youth in southeastern Ohio. So I think anything that can allow, within reason, anything that can allow this museum to expand the services it's offered is something that we ought to get on board with and help in any way we can.
Okay, Member DeLocke. I almost made you a council member. Citizen Bill.
Well, my map reading expertise, but Member Ziff has figured it out.
Okay, got it, okay. All right, yes, Councilmember McCann.
Thank you. I am noticing in our Athens 2040 comprehensive plan that there is a suggestion that we value add to the Ohio Valley Museum of Discovery with outdoor public space that complements the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics STEAM focus. And this is an outdoor project, but I'm wondering if there's been any, and I'm excited by the large chunk of money and such, but will this feed at all into this proposed goal for our comprehensive plan for making public space that complements STEAM stuff?
Absolutely, that's what this museum is.
And
Just
Mayor-
by virtue of parking, you're saying?
No, the museum itself is a STEAM museum.
Yes.
People come to see it, they're coming from not only Athens County, but the counties all around, got to have some place to put cars, school buses, and things like that. So yeah, this is definitely making it more accessible. The mayor can speak to it better than I, but it's an exciting project.
Okay, so a possible interpretation that adding outdoor public space that complements could be as practical as parking, yes?
Yes, it
Okay.
could, but no. The actual intent with that comment was the abutting property to this is the fire station headquarters, which also has a sizable green space. So it's opening up the opportunity to where for the existing green space beyond all this parking that OV Mod will own, that there could be some opportunity to have some outdoor recreational elements that would possibly transcend that property and use some of the city's property. But we also know that at some point in the future, if successful, that we will likely be divesting ourselves of the fire station headquarters, predicated upon several, I think, known factors. They're all on council. And so, but anyway, that's where that comment came from, was the possibility of just having usable green space by both OV Mod and the property that is the fire station headquarters.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, then the use of the right-of-way for Windstream Kentucky Data Link, the 55 feet of utility conduit. Any questions or comments about that?
I have one.
Yes.
This is not a special use of the right-of-way. This is a registration, because Windstream Kentucky Data Link is a utility under the PUCO, and it's a different section of Title 49 that is granted through council for utilities. And specifically, you do a registration, one-time registration for the utility to be an an operating system inside the right-of-way, and then future permits are administrative. So while the 55 feet of utility conduit that is part of this was the thing that precipitated us to say, when they sought a permit for that, us to say, hey, you need to register as a utility in the right-of-way. But you're not granting the 55 feet of utility conduit as part of this legislation. You're granting them a registration, and then we'll permit the utility conduit because it's a different than the special use of the right-of-way situation. And if anyone has any questions of that, I can get into the specifics on how we developed this in Title 49.
Thank you for the clarification. Councilmember Crowell?
I see the map, and I think this is on the southeast corner of West State and Schaefer, 55 feet. I don't get it. Why do they need 55 feet in that location?
I remember, Crowell, I don't have the specific item right now. My guess is it's something having to do with being able to provide telecommunications somewhere in the right-of-way that isn't hanging from a pole. In all cases where somebody gets a pole hanging agreement, when I say somebody, I mean a telecommunications company from another pole, from another utility, we don't even see those come across because they're basically just floating up there in the air, attaching to existing poles that are stuck in the right-of-way. But in this particular instance, I believe it is they've got partial of their run is via pole hanging agreement, and then they have to access a different location and are going underground, and so it's new conduit, and that's why they sought a construction permit, and we said, whoa, if you're a utility operating system in the right-of-way in the city, you need to register. And so they said, okay, we'll register, and that's why he's sharing this legislation right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If none, we will adjourn at 8:34, and we'll see you all next Monday night. Thank you.